All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. Now, whether it was serious flirtation or just smoke and mirrors, we may never find out, okay? But after the folks in stores were on pins and needles over the weekend, Dan Hurley has decided to spurn the Los Angeles Lakers in order to continue being the men's head basketball coach at Connecticut. Now, in recent days, the Lakers had zeroed in on making Hurley their next basketball head coach, but the 51-year-old turned down a 6-year deal for 70 million from the Lakers in order to remain at Connecticut. Hurley has no need to chase history as he is making history at Connecticut. You think about what the UConn basketball program has become in the last 30 some odd years, and six national championships now. And Hurley can now say something that the great Jim Calhoun couldn't say, and that's no discredit to Jim Calhoun. He had his team go back to back, okay, and now this is a UConn team that some people are saying has a possibility to go out there and make it three in a row, because now you got a Huskies team. They're going to be ranked in the top five to begin next college basketball season. And if you're Dan Hurley, why, oh, why would you want to walk away from that? Okay, it's one of those where we just saw Dan Hurley turn down Kentucky several months ago, and now he's turned down the Lakers. So you're talking about one of the blue bloods of all blue bloods of college basketball you said no to in Kentucky. And now you said no to one of the most marquee, if not one of the most notable NBA franchises franchises in all the professional sports. But at the end of the day, what it comes down to, Dan Hurley is a Northeast guy at heart. He's from Jersey City. He played his college ball at Seton Hall. Okay, he's coached at Wagner. He's coached at Rhode Island and now at Connecticut. And of course, his wife is from the Northeast as well. And happy wife equals happy life. And if the wife doesn't want to leave the Northeast, guess what? Dan Hurley is not going there. Now, I'll tell you like this. Hurley is a guy who was born to wear a whistle, came from and comes from a great basketball family. If you grew up in the Northeast, you know about Bob Hurley Sr. and what he did with his legendary basketball program at the high school level in Jersey. Then, his brother Bob Hurley Jr., tremendous player, tremendous point guard at Duke. And of course, Dan Hurley was no slouch at Seton Hall either. And now both of them have gotten into the coaching ranks just like their papa. So he's one of those guys that was born to wear a whistle. And I think Dan Hurley's style, Dan Hurley's intensity, okay, is more suited for the college game and not the pros. I just don't see Dan Hurley's personality fitting with the NBA. And I'm not just talking about with the NBA style, just the NBA players. I can't imagine Dan Hurley trying to ask NBA players to run suicides and run the stairs like he had them doing at Connecticut. And then for me, Dan Hurley is the guy who's going to call the shots for UConn's basketball program. I don't see a guy like Dan Hurley leaving the college game, leaving a good situation like he has at Connecticut to go to the Lakers if he's not going to have a significant say in personnel decisions. So that means him and Rob Palinka would have been butting heads. Okay, so it's one of those. With all of that said, he's the big man on campus in stores, and he would not have that same type of stroke in the National Basketball Association. The other thing for me is this: why take the Lakers job when you have LeBron James, who has a reputation of being a coach killer? And a lot of people have said, well, guess what? If Dan Hurley took this job, he would have been looking for a job in another year and a half, 2 years. So what makes you think that you have a guy in LeBron who is yet to listen to any head coach that he's had in the NBA. What makes you think that Dan Hurley, fresh out of college, is going to come out there and change that? And I know LeBron was showering Dan Hurley with praises in recent days. You know, there were rumors about, them looking to have him coach up Bronny if the Lakers draft him. Well, if LeBron was so concerned about Dan Hurley coaching up Bronny, he could have just had him easily transferred to Connecticut from USC, let him help to get him ready for the NBA if that was the case, in my opinion. But getting back to Dan Hurley, him staying at Connecticut is not just a coup for the Huskies, but the Big East and college basketball as a whole, because it's been a tremendous several months for the Big East. They just got Hurley to return to Connecticut. Alex Caravan, who's a two-time national champion at UConn, is returning for a possible three-peat. Ryan Kalkbrenner, the reigning Big East Defensive Player of the Year, has decided to come back to Creighton. And then, you look and see what Rick Pitino is doing as he is continuing to grow his program at St. John's. You got a good Seton Hall program in that league. You got a good Providence program in that league. Like I've talked about before, Georgetown, I do expect them to make some strides this year under Ed Cooley. You look at Xavier, you look at Butler. We could just go right down the list. Marquette with Shaka Smart. So this is once again going to be a competitive league. And I don't think the Big East is only going to get three teams next year for the NCAA tournament. And I think now having Hurley back at UConn gives the Big East that opportunity to be back in that spotlight. And that is big for that league. So at the end of the day, was this quote unquote flirtation with the Lakers going after Dan Hurley? Was it all smoke and mirrors? And is JJ Redick their guy? And has JJ Redick been their guy all along? I will say this. If Dan Hurley was truly the Lakers guy, you fired Darvin Ham on the 5th of May. So why did it take more than a month for them to go out there and formally interview this guy? Okay. If Dan Hurley was truly the Lakers guy and they fired Darvin Ham on May 3rd, by the 10th of May, they should have had Dan Hurley in for an interview. So that part of it, I'm not buying it. I think at the end of the day, this is JJ Redick's job to lose. I don't think that any worthwhile coach wants this job. And I think that is indicative of what the Lakers have become. It's indicative of what LeBron has become, because at the end of the day, nobody wants to coach LeBron anymore. Okay. And it's one of those, because of that, nobody wants to be bothered with the Lakers. The Lakers have become a joke. Okay. So I look at it like this. I think it was all smoke and mirrors. I think JJ Redick is going to be their guy just for the sole purpose of placating to LeBron for the last couple of years of his NBA career. So for me, with Dan Hurley in Connecticut, I think it's kind of like a Jim Harbaugh situation at Michigan before he ultimately took the Chargers job. I think this is a situation, this is an opportunity or for Dan Hurley to get more money. He was already going to get at least 50 million from Connecticut after he turned down Kentucky. I think there's going to be a couple of more dollars added on to that. And Dan Hurley's going to be at Connecticut for as long as he wants to be there. And more importantly, for as long as his wife wants him to be there. I mean, it's one of those for me. If Dan Hurley decides to stay at UConn long term, I think he could have a bigger impact on the program than a Jim Calhoun did. And I say it from the standpoint, if he stays there long term, because if 5 years from now, we're talking about Dan Hurley taking an NBA job or Dan Hurley taking another college job, I think all of that is out of the window. But if Dan Hurley wants to stay at Connecticut for another 15 to 20 years, we're talking about a guy who's already shown the ability to win here. I think what he has done in his 4 years at Connecticut, he has woken a sleeping giant, because I feel like under Jim Calhoun, Connecticut did not get the respect that they deserved. And I mean, you think about what Jim Calhoun did to start this program. He brought UConn from nothing, literally. Okay. And in the 80s, they continued to grow. They continued to get better in a very tough Big East in those days with St. John's, with Georgetown, with Seton Hall, with Pitt, with Syracuse, with Providence. Okay. And when it was all said and done by the 90s, Jim Calhoun made Connecticut the program that everybody else in the Big East wanted to be. Finally broke through and got that first national championship in 1999. Got two more along the way. Kevin Ollie got one as well with Connecticut. And of course, the last two have come courtesy of Dan Hurley. But the thing is, like I've said before a couple of months ago, people need to respect this Connecticut program. Clearly, Dan Hurley is doing something right if you figure that both Kentucky and the Lakers have come after him in the last couple of months and he said no and he's decided to remain in store. So I think he is building something great. And as long as he stays there, it's only going to be greater. I think the sky is the limit for Dan Hurley in this program. It's one of those where he's going to consistently get guys in the portal. He's going to consistently get quality recruits from the Northeast and honestly all over the country because they've seen what he has done for other guys that are going to the NBA now. They've seen what he's been able to do as far as winning. And I'll tell you like this, that UConn fan base, they it's not just a Connecticut thing, it's a New England thing when they're involved, okay? And they're all in on this program. They're all in on Dan Hurley. He's their coach. And I think the Huskies and Dan Hurley have a great opportunity ahead of them going forward. So, folks, that is going to wrap it up. And as always, I want to take this time out to thank all of you for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. I want to take this time out to thank all of you fine folks out there for tuning in. And if you haven't already, please feel free to subscribe to this channel. Now, if you're on the X, formerly known as Twitter, please feel free to follow me at 300 Pounds of Sports. And like I always say, if you follow me, it will be my pleasure to follow you right back. There's also the sports discussion group on Facebook at the Sports Depot 365. You can check it out. Drop a line and be a part of one of the better sports debating sites going on social media. So once again, fine folks, my name is William Martin, and I am signing off. And I'm saying take care and have yourselves a wonderful day.